Elijah Smith was like a lot of young people who did not like to wake up on Monday mornings to go to school. He had been off all day Saturday, all day Sunday, and he didn't always like getting up. In fact, he normally didn't like getting up on Monday mornings to go to school. But this Monday was different because when he got to school, he was going to get to leave school because he was going to get to go on a field trip this day. He had been on a few field trips in the first couple of years of his schooling, but this one was a special field trip because he was going to get to go to a museum of natural history located about 45 minutes from his hometown. And so he loaded the bus that morning at the school when his parents dropped him off, and he walked into the front doors of this museum of natural history, and he was greeted by an assortment of large reptiles like Oviraptor and Brachiosaurus and Triceratops and Stegosaurus. And he was really interested in the Stegosaurus dinosaur there, and so he stopped for just a few minutes and he noticed a placard at the bottom of the Stegosaurus titled "The Ruling Dinosaurs." And then he began to look at that placard real closely, and he noticed the word Triassic, and he noticed the word Jurassic and Cretaceous, but the word Triassic stuck with him, and he knew that he had read that word sometime earlier just that morning. In fact, he had read about the Triassic period, and he was learning now about how far back the Triassic period went. He had read about this earlier that morning when he had opened up his package of oatmeal and saw the word Triassic on it. And he now was learning at the Museum of Natural History that the Triassic period went back some 225 million years ago, supposedly when the dinosaurs evolved on Earth. And they lived until allegedly about 60 or 70 million years ago. Well, after touring the Museum of Natural History, Elijah and his classmates were able to go to a fast food restaurant. And they were able to get, like so many young people love to get, my children love to get, the little kids' meals where they can get hamburgers or chicken fingers and French fries, and then before they even eat their meals oftentimes, they get the little toy that's in it, and little Elijah was able to get the dinosaur out of the Dinosaur Happy Meal. And he checked it out to make sure that T-Rex had the right number of claws and the right number of teeth and was about the right size of a toy Tyrannosaurus Rex. And then he began to look more closely at this bag, and he read the alleged fact in bold font that birds are probably related to dinosaurs. He hadn't heard that one before. He had heard that dinosaurs had evolved millions of years ago. In fact, he had been bombarded already by that alleged fact just that morning, both at the museum and as he was eating his oatmeal. And now he is questioning whether dinosaurs really did evolve into birds. Well, after leaving the fast food restaurant, he went back to school, and having been pumped up all day by information about dinosaurs, his teacher decided that she would read to the class from a dinosaur book. And she began on the first page with the first sentence: millions of years ago, dinosaurs roamed the earth. There were dinosaurs on earth for 120 million years, but all of them had disappeared long before the first humans lived. And the teacher turned page after page and was mesmerizing these little second graders with all of this information about dinosaurs. And she got to the very last page of the book, and she read, the last of the dinosaurs died out about 70 million years ago. Whatever happened, it is important to keep in mind that dinosaurs lived on this earth for at least 120 million years. According to the most recent discoveries, humans have lived here for only a few million years. Little Elijah woke up reading about when the dinosaurs supposedly lived. He was able to go to a museum of natural history. He got a kid's meal and read about dinosaurs supposedly evolving into birds. He went back to school and heard his teacher reading about dinosaurs. After his parents picked him up from school, they decided they would take him to a bookstore. They were interested in one of the new books that had come out, and so they went to go pick up a book, and he was allowed to go to the children's section. And wouldn't you know, that he went to the children's section and found a bookshelf that was dedicated solely to dinosaurs. I mean, how many animals do you know of that have their own bookshelf? I've never seen a bookshelf of bears or a bookshelf of snakes or a bookshelf of penguins, but dinosaurs had their own bookshelf. And he was able to choose one book that day, and you can guess what kind of book he chose. He chose a book about dinosaurs, and this was a book from the Magic School Bus series titled In the Time of the Dinosaurs. He took it home, and he and his parents were reading this book together when he got home, and he read dinosaurs were on Earth 1,500 times longer than humans have been so far. No person ever saw a dinosaur. When early humans appeared, the book said, on Earth, dinosaurs had already been dead for millions of years. Well, Elijah had a lot of questions about dinosaurs. He thought maybe all of these books were answering his questions truthfully. Well, tonight you're going to see how the propaganda that is out and about all over the place. It's at the malls, it's on the big screens in the movie theaters, it's in the grocery stores, it's in schools, it's all over. And it's propagating the idea that dinosaurs lived millions of years ago. And along with dinosaurs comes the theory of evolution. You see, more than anything I have ever seen, the poster children of evolution are dinosaurs. Dinosaurs are to evolution what the duck is to Aflac, what the gecko is to Geico. Dinosaurs are to the theory of evolution. Some of you may have eaten at Subway lately. You know that the poster child of Subway these days for the last 5 years or so has been Jared. Well, Jared is to Subway what dinosaurs are to the theory of evolution. And young people are oftentimes bombarded with this information. Let me show you a science textbook, middle school science textbook. This particular one came from Graves County, Kentucky. It's been used all over the United States. It was published back in 1994. It's called Evolution, Change Over Time. This book is dedicated to teaching young people, specifically middle schoolers, about the theory of evolution. Now, how much information do you think they have in this approximate 100-page textbook on evolution? How much information do you think they have in this textbook about dinosaurs? Well, after going through every page of this book, out of the 100 pages in this textbook, exactly, or at least 32 of them have information or pictures about dinosaurs. That is 1 out of every 3 pages in a textbook about the general theory of evolution. 1 out of every 3 pages. There was information on certain pages, the main gist of a particular chapter or a particular section in a chapter that had nothing to do with dinosaurs, but there would be a picture of a dinosaur. The first 2 chapters open up with a large picture and information about dinosaurs. Dinosaurs are, more than anything I have ever seen, the icon of evolution, and I believe it warrants our discussion of this topic tonight and at other times as well. And it's something, as we've already stated, that younger people are being bombarded with earlier and earlier in life. And it shouldn't be a surprise. The evolutionist Daniel Dennett wrote a few years back concerning parents who teach their children something other than evolution. Parents who teach their children something other than evolution. Notice what Dr. Dennett said, an evolutionist, said about this. He said, those of us who have freedom of speech will feel free to describe your teachings. That is the teachings of parents who teach their children that there is a God, that the Bible is the Word of God, that Jesus is the Son of God, that dinosaurs aren't separated from man by millions and millions of years. He says, those of us who have freedom of speech will feel free to describe your teachings as the spreading of falsehoods and will attempt to demonstrate this to your children at our earliest opportunity. At our earliest opportunity. How early do you think? Well, here is a brief pop-up book about the history of life on earth. And from the beginning to the end of this book, what you see is what Kyle quoted for us in the last lecture in this seminar, the first lecture in this seminar. Basically, the evolutionary tree of life, or the idea that an amoeba evolved into a worm, and that worm evolved into a fish, and that fish evolved into an amphibian, and that amphibian into a small reptile that evolved into a dinosaur, that evolved into a mammal, that eventually evolved into man. This is being taught to those who are interested in pop-up books. Who do you think is really all that interested in pop-up books? Well, young children. And then when you turn over to the very last page or the very back of the book, you will read millions of years ago, life on earth started in the oceans, then it moved on to land, and eventually led to you. How early are they starting to feed young people information about evolution? And what are they using? Notice the cover of the book. What are they using to entice young people, to teach young people about evolution more than anything that's out there? Well, they're using dinosaurs. In the January 1993 issue of National Geographic, in an article titled Age of Dinosaurs, on a page noted as the Geo Guide page, the very first line of the article read, "No human being has ever seen a live dinosaur." No human being, allegedly, has ever seen a live dinosaur. And then the very last line, very small print on the bottom of the page said, "Use this Geo Guide page to help capture the interest of young readers and stimulate discussion with them." What kind of discussion do you think they would like for you to have with young readers? Well, the alleged fact that no human being has ever seen a live dinosaur, that dinosaurs that they died out 70, 60 million years before humans ever came on this earth. There's a reason to discuss this issue. I know there may be some who hear the idea of dinosaurs and talking about dinosaurs and may wonder, well, what's the big deal about dinosaurs? Why should we even hear a lesson about this? Why even discuss this matter? Because they are the poster children of evolution. And not only that, but notice what Dr. Philip Kitcher said in his anti-creationist book titled Abusing Science, The Case Against Creationism. It's a book that the renowned Stephen Jay Gould called a brilliant book. Dr. Philip Kitcher claimed in this book that solid evidence for the coexistence of dinosaurs and humans would shake the foundations of evolutionary theory because, of course, the dinosaurs are supposed to have been long extinct by the time the hominids arrived on the scene. Why do you think that Dr. Philip Kitcher would say that if you could prove that dinosaurs and humans actually lived together, you would have shaken the foundation of evolutionary theory? Well, because he knows, as we know, that dinosaurs have been so tied into the theory of evolution, you really cannot separate the two, at least in their minds. Oh, I can. Because I believe there is solid evidence that indicates humans did once see dinosaurs and lived with them. Think about it for just a moment. If humans ever lived with these large reptiles, some were small, some were large, and many of the more well-known ones were very large. If humans ever did live with them, what evidence would have been left behind? If humans ever saw these creatures, interacted with these creatures, what kind of evidence might we find? Well, one thing I believe that we would find, just as if we were going somewhere today and wanting to prove to someone that we saw something, I believe there would be some kind of pictures left behind. If you go to a faraway place and you come back and tell people about where you have been, you will be more convincing if you bring back pictures to show them where you have been. Well, the ancients have left images for us, not Polaroid images, not digital camera images, not 35mm pictures, but images for us that they have drawn or carved that I believe prove beyond any shadow of a doubt that humans and dinosaurs once coexisted in the past. Not millions of years ago, but only thousands or even hundreds of years ago. Let me take you to Natural Bridges National Monument that is located in southeastern Utah, about 40 miles west of the small town of Blanding, Utah. At the Natural Bridges National Monument, you have what I have been told are two of the three largest natural bridges in the world. One of those bridges is known as Kachina Bridge. Now, on the underside of one of the spans of Kachina Bridge, you will see several different pieces or types of rock drawings or carvings. There is a carving or a drawing or a pecking of the rock called a petroglyph of what appears to be a human figure. There's another one that appears to be that of a wild goat of some kind. And there are others that are clearly handprints. There are several different kinds of rock art there at Natural Bridges National Monument. But the one that is the most interesting to visitors is the one that you will see on the screen here in just a moment, that is just to the right of the human figure. It is the one that you see on the screen that is circled. Now, granted, it is somewhat light here, and so I'm going to outline it for you so that you can see it just a little bit better. And you will notice that this is a carving on the rock of a creature with a long neck and a long tail and a fairly large body. And when I show this picture to young people, without coaxing them at all or trying to get them to tell me what this is, they tell me time and time again that this is a hippopotamus. No. They tell me that this is a wild boar. They tell me this is a giraffe. No. Over and over and over again. I just showed this picture to 10 middle schoolers recently. 8 of them said clearly it was a dinosaur. One of them just was very vague, saying it was a rock carving. The other made some other statement that sounded very similar to a dinosaur-like creature that you read in the book of Job that hopefully we will talk about in our next lesson in this series. When you look at this image, and I'm going to blow it up for you here so you can see it just a little better, I believe any honest person who looks at this would have to say this appears to be, looks exactly like, to me, a long neck, long tail dinosaur. But I don't want you to take my word for it. I don't want you to take the word of those 10 middle schoolers for it that I asked about, or that I asked to look at this and give me their feedback when they saw it for what I believe to be the very first time. I want you to see what a couple of evolutionists have stated about this particular piece of rock art. Fran Barnes, who is an evolutionist and recognized authority on rock art, he's written a book titled Canyon Country, Prehistoric Indians, Their Culture, Ruins, Artifacts, and Rock Art. He stated on page 201 of this book that there is a petroglyph at Natural Bridges National Monument that bears a startling resemblance to a dinosaur, specifically a brontosaurus with long tail and neck, small head, and all. The brontosaurus name is a more popular name for the dinosaur known as Apatosaurus. Now, according to this evolutionist and rock art expert, this rock carving, this petroglyph, resembles, in fact, bears a startling resemblance to a dinosaur. If that is what it is, and it sure looks that way to, I believe, most unbiased people, then tell me how people who supposedly in the past never saw dinosaurs could draw such an accurate picture of what is and what looks like, and as even this evolutionist would say, bears a startling resemblance to a dinosaur. You see, we only began learning about these reptiles, dinosaurs, in the last 150 years or so. The word dinosaur wasn't even invented, was not even coined until the early 1840s. And yet we were told, the experts have said, that these carvings are from the Anasazi Indians who lived in this part of what is now the United States from about AD 400 to about AD 1400. Long before we began finding dinosaur bones fossilized in the ground and began excavating them and studying dinosaur bones. How did the ancients know how to draw these creatures if they never saw them? Notice another evolutionist, a geologist, and also a rock art expert, what he had to say about this same petroglyph. Dennis Slifer, in his book Guide to Rock Art of the Utah Region, published just in the year 2000, said one of the most curious designs is a petroglyph that resembles a dinosaur which is apparently of Anasazi origin based on its patination. Based upon the pecking of the rock, based upon what you still see there in the natural desert varnish that is covering this petroglyph, this rock art expert says it is apparently very old, of the Anasazi origin, and it resembles a dinosaur. In fact, in his book, this is the illustration, or a similar one to the one he gives in his book. A long neck, long tail creature illustrating what he saw there on the rock wall at Natural Bridges National Monument. And you'll notice there how similar that this long-necked, long-tailed dinosaur looks to looks like some of the dinosaurs that scientists say once lived on this earth, Mosasaurus and Ceteosaurus. Kyle and I were able to go to Natural Bridges National Monument a few years ago, and after seeing this petroglyph, we went up to the visitor center. Well, when those who worked at the visitor center noticed that we found out that we had been down there to look at this particular petroglyph, they were curious to see what our reaction was, and we asked them, well, how do people explain this? How do those scientists who say that humans never saw dinosaurs explain this petroglyph? Her first comment, I will never forget, she said, they don't really want to. And then she stated it was too early to be a horse. And I can only assume she would make that statement because she believed, well, maybe this looks similar to a horse, but it couldn't be a horse because the Anasazi did not have horses. They were already gone from this area of the country before horses were brought to the Americas by the Spaniards. And then she stated, some people think it really is a picture of a dinosaur, but they are crazy. I couldn't help but think maybe she was trained to make that statement. And we didn't tell her at that point in time that we really thought it was a dinosaur. But then she made one other statement. She indicated that there are petroglyphs that resemble mammoths. So she said the petroglyph at Kachina Bridge may be just, quote, some monster that the Anasazis carved on the rock. Just some monster. Well, it just so happens that this monster looks exactly like what we know some of the long-neck, long-tail dinosaurs look like. After leaving the Natural Bridges National Monument, we traveled to the Dinosaur Museum, just about 40 to 45 miles away from Blanding, or from the Natural Bridges National Monument. The museum was located in Blanding. It still is there today. And in that museum, you will find fossils of an Apatosaurus or Brontosaurus dinosaur that were found in that area just 40 years earlier. So dinosaurs lived in that area, yes. Long-necked, long-tailed dinosaurs lived in that area in the past, yes. And long before we began finding out about dinosaurs from the fossil record in modern times, the Indians who were living there hundreds of years before that, they drew an accurate picture of a long-necked, long-tailed dinosaur, yes. How did they do that? Because they either saw these creatures or someone explained to them what these creatures looked like who did see them. Let me take you to the country of Cambodia for just a moment and show you one of the temples there that is still in existence in the country of Cambodia. There were many temples that were built back in the Khmer civilization, back from about the 8th century AD to about the 13th century AD. There were several temples that were built, and some of them were built by the King Jayavarman VII. In fact, one of those temples is known as the Ta Prohm Temple Monastery. And at the Ta Prohm Temple, at the corner of the south wall of the porch and the east wall of the main body of the Kapura, or the main entrance that's very tall there, is a 10-foot column covered with decorative circles. Now this temple was built, they believe, back in 1186, hundreds of years before we began finding dinosaur bones in the fossil record in modern times, back in the 1840s. When the word dinosaur was first coined. I want you to notice one of the images that has been carved into the rock of this temple. Now there are several animals that have been carved into the rock there. You can see pictures of lizards, you can see pictures of birds like parrots and swans, there are pictures of monkeys. There is one that appears to be perhaps a water buffalo with his head tilted to the side, but it is the image just under this one that is very, very compelling. When you look at this rock carving or this relief there on the rock, and you ask yourself, what is that? If you have ever seen a picture of a Stegosaurus, I think you would have to admit that looks like a Stegosaurus. That class I was telling you about a few minutes ago, that middle school class that I showed some pictures to ask them what these things were, I had shown them pictures of dogs, of goats. The goat had been carved onto a rock, and I showed them this picture. Every one of them, and to the best of my knowledge, they had never seen it before. Every one of them, at least they didn't tell me they had seen it before, said that this was, they either said specifically a Stegosaurus or a dinosaur. We know a gentleman who has been over there in that area. In fact, these pictures come from him, Don Patton. He has been there and he has studied this, and many others have seen this relief, and they testify that it is not possible for this to have been faked in the last few decades or even the last century, because you would have been able to have known that. There is 40 feet of rock above it. It is the same depth as all of the other carvings there in that rock. It could not have been falsified, else they would have been able to see that it had been. And so what do critics have to say about this particular rock carving? Well, they say it could not have been a dinosaur. It doesn't look like one. It was not scientifically accurate. On the screen there, you'll notice an image that a young child colored for me some time ago. I believe he was in the 3rd grade. His attempt was to draw a dinosaur. I had several others who drew different pictures of dinosaurs and colored them. These are not scientifically accurate representations of dinosaurs by any means, but every one of us knows exactly what they were trying to draw and color, and they knew it. They had seen image after image of dinosaurs. In fact, I had shown them some earlier before they drew me these pictures. And notice the one there that is painted red with a human, looks like, on its back. The attempt was to draw a triceratops, but notice how different from a triceratops it looks. Now, really, the only criticism that I have heard about the image that you see, or the carving that you see there in the Ta Prohm Temple in Cambodia is, well, it's not a scientific, precise, accurate picture of a stegosaurus. That does not mean that is not what the artist or the one who was carving it onto rock was trying to draw. And realize that this person was not drawing it on paper with a pen or pencil, or with a crayon or with a marker. They were carving this onto rock, and it is a better picture of a stegosaurus than most of us, perhaps all of us, could draw with a number 2 pencil and a white sheet of paper. Let me ask you this. When you look at a young person's attempt to draw a triceratops, and then you look at the relief there in the Ta Prohm Temple, and the one who carved this, or those, perhaps it was something done by multiple people, carved this onto rock, you can tell which one looks a lot more like a dinosaur. Not only that, they were carving this onto rock in a very limited amount of space, because all of the images there, all of the carvings, were inside of these small circles. Here is a picture of a stegosaurus. Not long ago, Kyle gave one of my sons a little toy. A toy stegosaurus that was inside of a small egg. Now notice the stegosaur there. The stegosaurus, the head is a little bigger. That is the toy stegosaur. Its tail does not have the spikes, but my kids and children in general understand that this is a stegosaurus. Now if we can understand that, then who cannot understand that the carving there in the Ta Prohm Temple looks like a dinosaur? And I think that most honest people know that it is. Now, if it is, how did it end up in a temple that was built in the 12th century AD, hundreds of years before we began learning about dinosaurs from the fossil record? There are a couple of gentlemen who have commented on this particular rock carving, and they are experts in the way of the ancient Cambodians. There is one gentleman, Claude Jacques, who actually has been studying the history of Cambodia for 30 years. He commented on this particular rock carving in one of his books, Angkor, Cities and Temples, that he and Michael Freeman wrote and illustrated together. And he said, roundels on pilasters on the south side of the west entrance are unusual in design. In particular, an animal which bears a striking resemblance to a stegosaurus. They wrote another book just a couple of years later titled Ancient Angkor, commented on the same rock carving and said, among the vertical strip of roundels in the angle between the south wall of the porch and the east wall of the main body of the Gopura, there is even a very convincing representation of a stegosaur. These gentlemen were not trying to prove that humans and dinosaurs lived together, but notice they were honest enough to say, similar to the comments that Fran Barnes made and Dennis Slifer did about the petroglyph at Natural Bridges National Monument, they said this is a very convincing representation of a stegosaur. But that's not all of the evidence that we have or indications we have that dinosaurs and humans are not separated by millions of years. Note this particular piece of rock art that comes from the Havasupai Canyon. It was discovered years ago, and Dr. Samuel Hubbard from the Oakland Museum of Natural History commented on this when he saw it back in the 1920s. And he said, taken all in all, the proportions are good. The huge reptile is depicted in the attitude in which man would be most likely to see it, reared on its hind legs, balancing with a long tail, either feeding or in a fighting position, possibly defending itself against a party of men. He was convinced that this rock carving looked very similar to certain kinds of dinosaurs. Perhaps it was an Edmontosaurus. Maybe it was a dinosaur with a little longer neck and a little longer tail. But he was convinced, and many people have been, that this is another piece of rock art that testifies to the fact that at some point in the past, humans lived with and saw these creatures and even carved them onto rock. The fact, said Dr. Samuel Hubbard, that some prehistoric man made a pictograph of a dinosaur on the walls of this canyon upsets completely all of our theories regarding the antiquity of man. The fact that the animal is upright and balanced on its tail would seem to indicate that the prehistoric artist must have seen it alive. And by the way, Dr. Samuel Hubbard did not go to the Havasupai Canyon to try to prove that humans and dinosaurs lived together sometime in the past. In fact, he was going there to try to prove that humans lived in what is now North America, or what we call North America, the United States, 1 million or so years ago. But when he saw a piece of rock art, I believe the gentleman was honest enough to say, this looks like a dinosaur. How could we have these types of pictographs and petroglyphs and many others around the world that have been discovered that you will not see in science textbooks in this country and probably not in the world? How is it that we have these in existence? Because humans once lived with dinosaurs and drew them and carved them. Interestingly, about 100 miles away from this particular piece of rock art, they found dinosaur tracks preserved in a layer of rock that is supposedly 165 million years old. Do we have proof that humans and dinosaurs once lived together? I believe we have very strong proof of that. We now go to the continent of Europe, and you can visit the Carlisle Cathedral in Carlisle, England, and visit the tomb of Bishop Richard Bell and see images of several different animals on the brass around his tomb, including an eel, a fish, a dog, a pig, a bird, and another one that looks very similar to a long neck, long tail dinosaur. Now, this is a tomb that was built 500 years ago. It's been walked across for centuries. Some of the brass, as you can tell, has been rubbed off, but you have another engraving, this time in brass, of a creature that looks similar to a dinosaur. And when you consider the fact that on the same brass there are animals that are easily recognizable, an eel, a fish, a bird, and other animals, and then you see a long-necked, long-tailed creature, and you realize that there have been stories told in England for hundreds and thousands of years all over the world in various countries of long-necked, long-tailed reptiles that once lived with humans. You begin to understand that there is powerful proof for the coexistence of dinosaurs and humans. And if that is not enough, when you consider just recently, in the last few years, that scientists have uncovered dinosaur bones that are not completely fossilized. In the March 2005 issue of Science magazine, Dr. Mary Schweitzer and some of her colleagues stated, soft tissues are preserved within hind limb elements of Tyrannosaurus rex. Removal of the mineral phase reveals transparent, flexible, hollow blood vessels. Some regions of demineralized bone matrix are highly fibrous, and the matrix possesses elasticity and resilience. She went on to say, or they did in the article, the demineralized fragment is flexible and resilient, and when stretched returns to its original shape. 2 years later, they wrote about the same find, and they said demineralization of femur and tibia fragments, that is of this T-Rex, revealed the preservation of fibrous, flexible, and apparently original tissues, as well as apparent cells and blood vessels. You're telling me we found a dinosaur bone that is not completely fossilized, that still has fibrous, flexible, soft, resilient tissue in it, and when you flex it, it goes back to its normal position? That's right. And yet when you read the articles that talk about this find, what you read is 70 million year old T-Rex bone dug up. You read paleontologists were stunned to find that the soft tissue of a 70 million year old dinosaur was preserved within a fossil from a Tyrannosaurus Rex. And this is not an anomaly. This isn't the only fossil of a dinosaur they have found that had not completely fossilized. In fact, just recently, Alan Boyle, the science editor for MSNBC, reported, today paleontologists are still stunned not only to find material that looks like dinosaur cartilage, blood vessels, blood cells, and bone cells, but to see the stuff in so many different specimens. There are a growing number of tissue samples, that is, soft tissue from dinosaur samples. It's not just a fluke occurrence. It's something that's more pervasive in the fossil record. They have excavated a T-Rex and a hadrosaur from Montana, a Titanosaurus from Madagascar, and, as was stated in the article, more samples that fossil hunter Jack Horner is finding in Mongolia as well as Montana. Dinosaur bones with soft, flexible, fibrous tissue inside of them. Regarding the hadrosaur specimen found in Montana, Dr. Mary Schweitzer stated, it's the freshest, if you will, dinosaur bone that has ever had this analysis conducted on it. What we're finding is absolutely incredible, amazing preservation. What's so incredible about it? They're 70 million years old, allegedly. One writer for the Baltimore Sun some months back wrote, miraculously preserved soft tissue from the femur of a 68 million year old T-Rex was found. Miraculously preserved. Yes, I do believe it would just about take a miracle to preserve a dinosaur bone for 70 million years. I believe this is another indication that dinosaurs are not separated from humans by 70 million years, but that they once coexisted on this earth, just like humans coexisted with a lot of animals that are no longer alive today. Notice also something else interesting that science has recently told us. Well, for years scientists told us, evolutionary scientists told us, that mammals, large mammals, didn't live with the dinosaurs, but that the mammals that lived with the dinosaurs were small, mostly mouse-sized and rare. In a U.S. News and World Report that was given just a few years ago, that was printed, they said the sad truth is mammals coexisted with dinosaurs for 150 million years, but they were never able to go beyond little rat-like things. Interestingly, not long ago they found a mammal 20 times larger than what evolutionists believe could be possible. And it was reported to be in the same fossil beds as dinosaurs. And one of these mammals actually had a dinosaur fossilized, its remains fossilized in the stomach area of the mammal. Friends, the idea that dinosaurs lived millions of years ago, the idea that humans came along 1,500 times later, after dinosaurs had already died out, millions of years later, simply is not provable. They are based on faulty dating assumptions that cannot be proven. And there is powerful evidence, as we have seen already in this lecture, and we will see some more in the next one, that humans and dinosaurs once coexisted on this earth. And we have, I believe, shaken the very foundations of evolution.